Welcome to the Startup Sessions, the #1 web show and podcast for trusting your gut, breaking the rules, and starting something meaningful. Featuring in-depth interviews with acclaimed creative entrepreneurs that have succeeded at building their own remarkable businesses. I'm your host, Michael Knouse, and today I have creative entrepreneur Tom Morkes on the show. Now, Tom helps people start, finish, and ship their creative projects, and he does it all remotely while exploring the globe and traveling to places like New Zealand, Bali, Australia, and South Africa. I guess you could say he's an intentional road warrior that gets to choose his destination while creating and growing his thriving business. So I'm very excited to bring you this interview because we really cover so much ground and discuss what's possible as a creative entrepreneur. So if you've ever felt that there's a book in you that's waiting to be written, a business you've been wanting to build, or a movement that's begging to be brought to life, then this episode will inspire you. It's all coming to you right now on episode 22 of the Startup Sessions. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Startup Sessions. Today, I am joined by a guy that travels the world while showing people how to start, finish, and ship creative projects. I'm speaking with Tom Morkes today. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Mike, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate getting the chance to talk to you and your audience.
Absolutely. Pleasure to have you here. So let me do a quick intro on Tom before we dig into the nitty-gritty of what we want to cover today. Tom is a writer. He's an author. He has his own publishing company. He's a startup consultant. Tom, you do a lot of things. You've got a lot on your plate. And that's one of the questions I have for you later today, actually, is you seem to churn out so much good content, and kind of want to know your secret, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So Tom has written The Complete Guide to Pay What You Want Pricing, which is a fascinating alternative that upon further, just looking at it more, seems to be a more profitable model than just setting your pricing for creative entrepreneurs. And that's on Tom's website, which I will have linked up here in the show notes. But Tom believes that everyone has a great creative project inside of them. And I really share that thought with you as well, Tom. And I love the work that you do to support people bringing those creative projects out into the world. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about one of your creative projects, which is your publication called The Creative Entrepreneur. But first, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you've been up to recently. You travel around the world while you're running your business. And I certainly travel more than when I used to work in the Cube, but you're on the road all the time. So tell us, where are you now? And where have you been in the past 6 months?
Yeah, so I'm in South Africa right now in Cape Town, which has been really amazing. And we've been here for about a month, my wife and I.
Okay.
And before that, we were in Australia. And then before that, Indonesia, Singapore, Australia again. We've been to Australia twice for both East Coast and West Coast. And then New Zealand and Hawaii, and I think that's it. So we've been traveling west, basically.
Got it. Okay. Some pretty great locations.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, for you, what came first? Was it the idea to travel, and then you built a business around that? Or did you intend to build a business that you could run remotely in the first place?
Actually, that's a really good question, because I think if I dig into it, I wanted to travel first, and then I built something around it as I was traveling. That's it, because before I left, probably within the last year, so I was in the military leading up to this, and then so in that last year in the Army, I was just like, well, what do I do when I get out? And so I'd been doing some writing and stuff like that on the side, but none of it was a sure thing for me.
Yeah.
So there was always that thought, well, because I do want to travel for sure, so I was like, well, I'm going to travel, and if I end up like straight up broke by the end of my travels, then I'll go do whatever I have to figure that out. But I really wanted to travel. So yeah, everything kind of followed from that.
Okay. Great. What do you think is the most important thing for people to understand about traveling and running a business remotely?
Oh, I guess that it can be really aggravating. And if you're like me and I think I have like slight dyslexia with like numbers. So like the time zones, every time I change time zones or I'm like connecting with people in multiple different time zones all the time, I constantly have like a world clock thing on my computer. I'm always
Yeah.
referencing like different dates and times. It's really difficult. So that's kind of
Okay.
painful. The second thing is,
Yeah.
um, it's pretty tough. Since it's such a like the starting point of a lot of the projects that I'm doing, like they're just now starting to take off a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Before, like when you think about it, a lot of my stuff hadn't launched. Like the Creative Entrepreneur came out in January, so before that, it was just kind of like the lead up to a lot of these things. My book before that, The Complete Guide to Pay What You Want, that came out in November. So these things have been kind of tapered, but I just like that's the beginning of it. And so that said, it takes a lot of hustle to launch things. So while I've been traveling, the second really difficult thing is, well, I guess, or because it can be just frustrating, is trying to do all that you'd be able to do in the States or wherever you are, if you were like centrally, or if you were located in one spot, and trying to do it while you move around. It can be really difficult if you're moving place to place. So that's what I found, at least.
Okay. All right. But obviously the benefits of travel and being able to take your business on the road outweigh those inconveniences that you do have to face.
Yeah, and I think some of this stuff, at least this is my belief, and I could just be naive here and prove myself wrong in a year or two or something like that, but my thought process is that it's a lot of upfront work right now, like any startup venture might be.
Mm-hmm.
But once it gets to a certain scalable point or a certain tipping point, I guess if you depending on how you want to view that, once it gets to a certain like cash flowing point, then for me, at least the way I've designed it is, it shouldn't be as time intensive for me. So it's it's almost like if you want to take a note from the 4-Hour Work Week, and he's talking about building a Muse business, except I disagree with that because I'm like, well, if I'm going to put so much time into building a Muse business that I don't really care about, why not build a business I do care about?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference between me and Tim there on that book. So, but this thing, once it gets going, it'll be something that'll be self-perpetuating and pretty self-sustaining, but something that doesn't take up a ton of my time to do, and is still like something I really enjoy doing. So that was the goal at the end of it. So I knew it would be a lot of upfront work, but I know that once it gets to a certain point, it won't be like that.
Okay. That's interesting to hear you say that. I mean, that's the foundation for my business as well. And, it is a lot of work up front, but I think you made a great point in that if you're working on something that is tied to, just something that you've always wanted to create or do, or a way that you want to serve, I mean, yeah, it's hard work, but it's much different than, for example, the work I used to do when I, went into the software company and, did marketing and business development for some software that I didn't really care about. So it's a whole nother ballgame when you're doing it for yourself, for sure.
Yeah, no, I think that actually changes everything, at least depending on the type of person you are. Yeah. So I guess for you and I, and then for anybody in the audience that resonates with that, that's the type of person,
Yeah. Yeah. You probably, well, I'm not going to assume that you talk to people like this every week, but I have conversations with people, it seems like almost every week, that do feel trapped in their day job, and they want to break out and they want to do something creative, or, even do something creative on the side while they're still working. And many of them just find it challenging to, make that leap to doing that creative work, or actually doing it to a level that allows them to step out of the day job that they might not like. What advice would you give to someone that's just, they're in that phase where they're contemplating escaping the rat race, and they're looking for that next, that next step to take to move closer to, doing something creative?
I guess the uncomfortable answer is it depends, and it depends on it depends on your nature. Like, what are you like? For example, what I mean by that is, when I left the military, I had been doing a lot of stuff on the side, like writing in my spare time, things like that. But none of what I had done was, I guess, had I built to like a certain level where I knew it was certain. I still like there was still a great, and it's still uncertain today, to be honest with you. So it's still like this great chasm between like the certainty of like if you're coming from a job and the certainty of being self-employed. Like there can be quite a gap there, especially if you're jumping into something that's quite unrelated, like I was. So going into writing publishing has nothing to do with what I did before. Had I gone into some sort of like military consultancy, there might have been some applicable crossover. So a lot of people, so I guess there's a few elements there, but one is if you don't have a sure thing, be mindful of that. If that's something that drives you, making a leap without a net, then do that. I wouldn't recommend it. I think I kind of did that, and it works for me, but that's the type of mindset that I have. So it just depends on the type of person. But I also did stuff on the side, like I said. So that gave me an idea that I enjoyed it, that I would put in the time and effort when the time came, that I'd be able to make it profitable at some point, because I'd made it profitable to a small degree when I was in the Army. I was like, okay, I can scale this. Like, I believe I can, and I'm going to at least try. So all those things are kind of important to keep in mind. So I would recommend, of course, that more conservative route is see what you can do on the side right now. If you have a day job that you can start doing on the side that you enjoy and you can start making money doing. It's really simple. It takes, you can do this stuff in an hour a day online with the tools and technology that we have today. It's really incredible. The opportunity now is better than it's ever been. And if people are listening, well, there's so much competition out there. There's really not. I think there's not a lot of competition. It's just a matter of, do you have a good idea, and can you get that idea in front of the people who care about it?
I love that. That's well said. I think you're right on, especially when you speak about just the access that we have to a growing number of tools that just make life easier every single day for someone that wants to take a creative idea and some ambition and marry the two together and create something that's pretty darn cool. So,
yeah.
Let's see. What about, okay, I want to come back to the question I was thinking of earlier about you and your business, which is, you produce what seems to me a pretty good amount of new content and cutting edge products. The things that you've created with the Creative Entrepreneur and the thing that you've created with your complete guide to, pay what you want pricing. Mm-hmm. Those products feel very unique and genuine to me as, looking at your products from my perspective. And that's refreshing because I see a lot of products out there that kind of, look a lot like other products. And so, first I want to compliment you on, I really feel the uniqueness of you in the work that you've created. But I'm curious, how do you simultaneously produce all the content that you do and stay motivated day in and day out to continue that?
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate that. That's good to hear because maybe you recognize this too as a creator. Like sometimes I think when we build things, we don't necessarily get feedback all the time on what we do. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of just guessing and we're hoping that it's good. And so people, the fact that people subscribe and buy this stuff is definitely validation, and I appreciate that. But it's always good to hear those words. So thank you. The second thing is, as far as like how I'm able to, so travel makes that really difficult. So again, if you're just starting out or you have a job right now, there should be some comfort in knowing that, hey, if you have a consistent schedule, there's certain things you can do and you can work around that, and you can really optimize your time. So I don't necessarily have that luxury, but I gave that up willingly. Excuse me. I made that train off when I started traveling. So it's just kind of the nature of the beast. So the second thing is, because of that, I'm forced to work within these certain parameters or certain restrictions as I travel to create this stuff. Which means I had to get really, really particular and methodical about my time use, and just more organized and more clear on what I'm creating and why. So in the beginning, and when you're just starting out, you can absolutely just play around with things. I encourage that. It's what I did in the beginning. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But then when these things started to resonate with people, that's the direction I was like, okay, good. Well, now that I'm getting feedback, now that people are buying, I know this is something I mentioned scale, right? This is something that if somebody likes this idea, more people like this idea.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the projects that I've worked on, every single one has been something that I've been very, very interested by. And so it was very much a creative project for me, something I really was interested by. So the complete guide to pay what you want pricing it was just a topic. I used pay what you want before, and I had some success with it. And then when I tell people about it, they'd ask me like a million questions. So I was like, well, that's interesting. Why isn't there a resource out there for this? Yeah. So it was something that, researching the gift economy, unconventional pricing methods, that kind of stuff was just a really enjoyable project for me. The way I went about doing that, though, was quite rushed. I packed that in. It did it over the course of maybe 6 months, but really it was really time intensive the last 2 months of writing and building that. When it came to the creative entrepreneur, same deal. Because I was on the road, I kind of let things get pushed up to the end. So as I was building it, that was even more chaotic because there were so many more submissions to deal with from other people. So I had to coordinate the editor. I had a designer, but I also did a lot of the design myself. So I did a lot of the editing myself. I did a lot of the writing and editing myself. So there's a lot of, so yeah, I'm definitely involved in that project as well. So that was very time intensive as well for the launch. So now I've got a couple other projects I'm working on. We just launched another book actually out of Insurgent Publishing called The High Performance Athlete, which is with our first single author. It's our first single author book by Dr. Jason Winkle, who's a high performance consultant. And so it's for athletes and students, but it extends to entrepreneurs and things like that. So that's been another example of a project that's kind of, it's funny, like the way I've started to now stagger my projects better to give myself like a couple months between launches of different things, because before, so there's just too much going on, and then you get overwhelmed. So coming back to your answer, to be very practical here, so somebody actually can take action steps from what I'm saying instead of just listening to me ramble, is I've become very methodical about my time use. I've started tracking my time. I track my time in Toggle. It's a really great app that I use. It's free online, so check it out. Okay. And no affiliation there, just really solid. And since I've been toggling, that's toggl.com. Since I've been doing that, my productivity has increased like 2 or 3 times. Just simply tracking what I'm doing, not actually trying to be more efficient, but just tracking. Because the moment I press start on the clock, I start doing that task. And so it's like, no, I can't look at Facebook. I can't look at Twitter. I got to do this task. Yeah. So that's been really powerful, toggling, tracking my time. Okay. Putting out a launch calendar. So now that I have some certainty of like what I've created here, when you're just starting out, you might not have any idea, so a launch calendar doesn't make any sense. But once you have some consistency of what you're doing, like with your podcast, you can probably start tracking. Okay, these are the dates I'm going to launch podcasts, and that's a launch calendar. And that kind of calendar is really important to be consistent and to continue to push content. And so then, if you're wondering, well, how do you keep doing original stuff? I think we're all original. I think we all have probably a million ideas boiling up inside of us. It's just like, how do we focus that into something that really interests us right now, that we can do really well, and that will resonate with a large audience. Yeah. So I'm hoping that the stuff that I create doesn't miss the mark, and that it's hitting the broadest audience it can. But someday I'm sure I'll do something that I really am passionate about, I really love, and it just falls flat. And that's always a possibility. But that's the balancing act there, is to make sure it's something I love, because if I love it, I'll put way too much effort into it. If I put way too much effort into it, I hope it'll show and it'll over-deliver. Yeah.
That's the sense that I get, from the products that I've seen of yours is that you do over-deliver. The content is so rich, and there's a substance, there's a quality that's delivered. And that's, I think that's one thing that we can all take away from like your example is that's powerful, is you mentioned and alluded to earlier that, some people might say, oh, well, there's so much competition out there. If you take a product that you believe in and you pour your entire heart and soul into that product, it's going to be different from everything else out there. Even if it's similar, it's going to be different because you've left your stamp on it and you've, poured your best into that product or that service. So I just think that's important for the viewers and listeners to understand.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's switch gears here. I have been super interested, curious, and impressed about your project, The Creative Entrepreneur. So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us tell us about The Creative Entrepreneur.
Yeah. So this is something I'm still trying to work on the 5-second tagline for because there's a lot of different things going on to this, and I think the listeners will understand in a second. So at its most basic level, it's a business and arts journal. So it's a combination of business advice, stories, less. Well, there's definitely advice in it, but it's like business stories from entrepreneurs who are actually on the ground creating things. Their own personal stories about other entrepreneurs, and actionable stuff that, again, that you can read and learn from and then apply in your own business. So it's this combination, although focused, I think, primarily on the stories of these entrepreneurs. And then the other half of that is the art piece, which is I've gotten artists to come on board and create artwork for this thing. And so it's a kind of a mishmash hybrid journal. And when I say journal, and some people actually got confused and told me that. They're like, "Oh, I thought you meant a diary." No, it's like think a digital magazine. But when I say journal, I reference a scientific journal and it being more academic. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying, my goal with every issue is to make it, and we just started. So one down, the second one I hope to continue is to make it academic, to make it something that's longer lasting than just, say, a digital magazine. So that means we do it twice a year. So it's not every month. So every 6 months. So it gives me 6 months to pull together the authors for this, to get together the artists, and to make each issue unique and compelling. Mm-hmm. So we're working on the second one here. So what's really fascinating though about it. So that's it's basic overview. I guess what's really fascinating about it is two things. Is the pricing model I used was pay what you want. And I'm still tweaking the delivery of that to see what works best. But right now, it's $1 an issue minimum, and then it's $1 plus per issue. So $2 a year, and bonuses at certain levels. So, and the idea is that we've also tied it to charity, or to Kiva in this case. Mm-hmm. So Kiva does these microloans to people all around the world, and they're usually no interest microloans. So we teamed up with them to deliver, to raise funds and then fund entrepreneurs in developing countries. So every person who now pays, so you might be thinking, well, why would I pay more than $1 for this? Well, one, for the bonuses, but two, because you get to decide how much your contribution goes to these entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. So what's really cool is within 2 months, we raised enough to fund our first entrepreneur through this program, whose name is Gavar, and she's from Tajikistan. And so now she is able to have the money to fund her business, to start her sewing business. Something that, it seems small, it seems unimportant. But what's really cool about this is that's quite a dramatic impact in her life and the community there. And what's really compelling about this whole process is that because it's subscription-based, this journal, because it's donation-based, and because Kiva does loans, these people will be paying these loans back. You add all this up, and the impact becomes exponential. And I don't mean that like in a hyperbole kind of way. Mm-hmm. I mean it's actually exponential if you graph it out, because the reoccurring nature of somebody's contribution every year will mean additional money into this fund. Mm-hmm. The money that gets loaned out to an entrepreneur will get paid back and then added on top of that. And then any new subscribers we get in will be additional income. So if you chart that out, I literally have to visualize it for myself. I was like, is this really true? It compounds. So it's a compounding philanthropic initiative, which I've never seen ever before. So I'm really proud of it.
That is cool. That's fantastic. I mean, just grasping the concept and the power of that is is pretty amazing. So I love it. This has come full circle for you then in a short period of time. You've already funded your first entrepreneur in a developing country. That is, I mean, that's got to, how does that feel? How does that feel to have, your idea come full circle and be a reality?
It definitely made me feel like not like a fraud because that was always the idea, right? That was always the goal. It was always my promise. I was like, God, now I've put all this time and effort and I promised these things to people to like make this happen. I was like, I hope this is successful. Because just imagine I put this out there and nobody contributes and I don't get any money. It's like, oh my God, I would be just really, really embarrassed. So it feels good to be like, okay, I in this small way I have succeeded here, but which is important because now I know I can build it and I can grow this. So it was like it was vindicating, and I do feel good about it too, in that it was like inspiring for me because I was like, okay, now that we've got our first entrepreneur, this is real, this is tangible now.
Yeah, it's real.
And that changes stuff. So it was a really good feeling.
I love it. I love it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, one thing I noticed too on the Creative Entrepreneur, you've got some pretty amazing guests that have contributed to the publication. I saw Stephen Pressfield, Pat Flynn, Chris Guillebeau, John Lee Dumas, just to name a few. What was the key to getting their buy-in for participation in the publication? Was that an easy process? Did they get right on board? How did that work?
No, in some cases easy, I guess, but the process itself isn't. The process itself is simple but not easy to get people to help you and to build something with you. And so the simple process is you have to reach out to these people and you have to ask. So that's the simple answer. At the end of the day, like if you whittle it down to its most basic component, I just ask these people.
Yeah.
What that doesn't say is that it doesn't explain that that doesn't go into depth about what the email was like that I crafted, that I was very particular about crafting. It doesn't include that I've probably been connecting with these people for a long time before we ever asked for anything, and that I've been trying to help them out and promote their work for years in some cases, like Stephen Pressfield, who I've contacted like probably 3 or 4 years ago. I met him when I was at West Point, like back in 2006 or something like that, and I've just been a huge, just avid fan of his for so long, and so I've emailed him a few times in the past few years. Since then, all this stuff that goes into the back end that you don't see. So I think people, and I just say that to give clarity, that if somebody sees like some kind of finished product like that and is wondering like, oh, how do I do that? Well, the superficial answer is it's very simple, but the more difficult thing is to grasp is that a lot of this stuff is taken weeks, months, or years to build in terms of relationship building and things like that. So when I actually reached out to them, again, it was one of those things where I was like, okay, who are my low-hanging fruit, quote unquote, of really quality people that I respect that I would like to get on board here that I've connected with before in such a way that I think they would, right? So these are people that I've kind of built up. Some people I'm closer with than others, right? So John Lee Dumas, I'm pretty darn close with him in terms of like we're actually working on a project together called High Speed Low Drag, which is like a veterans network. Okay. So I'm tight with this guy. So I was like, hey man, if you have any time in your schedule to contribute, I would really love something from you. And sure enough, he did. He delivered, and it was awesome. And then other people are just like really super busy, and they don't have the time to contribute. Like John, like a full essay or something like that. So I was like, well, I want to see how I could still get these people on board. So for Stephen Pressfield, I was like, well, maybe it's just asking a simple question and getting a response. It's for some of these other people. So that's how I did it. In a nutshell, that's how I did it. And it was connecting with these people a little bit at a time, building those relationships, and then also being somebody who has built stuff in the past that I can say, look at my website, here's what I've done, or look at my essays, this is what I write. You can see my work speaks for itself. At least I like to think it speaks for what I'm capable of creating. So if somebody sees that and says, well, no, I don't. Your stuff looks amateur, Tom. I don't want to be a part of it. That's fair. It hasn't been the case yet, I don't think. So I just let my work speak for itself in that respect.
Okay, got it. Great. All right. The basis of a lot of your work is around helping people launch creative projects, which can be just about anything. It can be a blog, it can be a book, it can be a podcast, it can be a business, it can be really anything, because we all put our creative energy and spin into these things that we make, right?
Mhm.
What are the? I'm curious on this, and I think other people might want to understand too. Like, what was what was behind you starting to create things? Put your energy behind writing a book and starting a podcast and having a blog. What was it that instigated those things happening for you?
Okay, so I guess it would be a combination of two or three things.
Uh-huh.
One is when it comes to writing or publishing or these things that I'm doing right now, that comes from just I suppose, a deep-rooted desire in me that's always been there to be a creator, to be somebody who designs things with his own hands or whatever, that draws and writes and builds something from nothing, basically, or from other pieces. That's just the kid in me that's never going to leave.
Yeah.
So I enjoy that, but now I found a way to do it and semi make a living from it. Like, I'm still hustling. I want to be very clear here that I'm still getting to that point where I can say, yeah, I can take a month off from this, but no, I can't, because I'm still working very hard for this, but I've been able to make some money from this. That's incredible.
Uh-huh.
So one is the idea that it's just a creative outlet that I really enjoy. The second thing is, I've always, in the same vein, believed in my heart that I should be somebody who's building his own empire, maybe, or so to speak, or an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
So at a fundamental level, I've always believed in entrepreneurship. The concept that each individual should be building their own little piece of the pie, and they should have ownership. I'm a big believer in ownership. I believe if there's any issue in the world, it's because not enough people have enough ownership of things. Mm-hmm. So that if we can each be creators, we can each be entrepreneurs. That's why I like the idea of funding entrepreneurs in developing countries. There's no handout here. There's no here's some aid, and maybe I'll try to get you some more later on. It's here's money for a vision that you want to create. So here's the support you need, and financially go do it. Now go do it. So they still have to deliver on their end. To me, the impact that's gonna create funding entrepreneurs, that makes all the difference in the world, because they're the producers here. They're the people that take the risks and that do the great things, in my opinion, when I look at it. And there's so much failure that occurs when you try to do that kind of stuff. It's fraught. That path is fraught with failure. Yeah. Which is something that I think is important to realize and to recognize, and then to sympathize with any entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur. There will be difficult times. A lot of them fail, and that sucks. And that's why we should be so supportive of entrepreneurs and of creators, because there's just so many ways it can go wrong, and it's difficult, and it's sometimes lonely and uncomfortable. So it's twofold. I enjoy the creative process, and I want to be an owner. I want to be somebody who owns the stuff that I create. I don't understand. I guess this has been the thought process for me. Could I go get a job? Yeah, and I'm not against that. And I think if you're compelled to have a job, do it. I think that's amazing, especially if you do it in a field that you enjoy. And I'm not above getting a job at all. But I say to myself, if I can produce value for a company, why can I not produce value for myself in my own company? Mm-hmm. That's it. Like, that's the question I've been trying to answer, and I think I'm answering it now. But it's taken me a long time. It was never that answer was not clear. That seems like a simple question, but it's actually really difficult to do.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, and it's part of the process of even figuring out how you can add your special something to the world in your own unique way, in a way that others find valuable, and, like you said, contribute that piece to the pie. That effort in and of itself, I find, is a unique challenge that I enjoy most of the aspects of. Like, I look forward to that. Is this going to work or is it not? And how am I going to adjust it so that it's better? To me, that's invigorating. And I feel more alive than if I was, again, nothing against going to a job. I had one for several years, but it brings out something in me that, just wants to be brought out. When I am fully engaged in creating my own thing and I've got nobody to rely upon other than myself, there's something engaging, super engaging about that just feels right. And I think that a lot of people share that, and maybe some people don't. I worked with a lot of people in my past jobs they're brilliant at working for a company in a specific job, and that's just the nature of us being individuals, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it just had a very superficial and I suppose I'd be stereotyping here if I said this, but like I have some engineer friends who are very good at like programming,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what they enjoy doing. And so for them, like the best outlet is probably to go work for a startup if they like that angle of like creating code from scratch and like building things in the chaos of a startup. Like a tech startup is great for them because the reality is they get funding that way. They get to do what they love. Like there's literally nothing wrong with that at all. Like I don't want to come off that way to that extreme.
Yeah.
That's like the only way to go is to like be self-employed or something like that. I don't believe that at all.
Yeah.
But I just think that it's different strokes for different folks. It's different things that inspire us. And so for me, and I think probably a lot of people listening to this show, I mean, heck, it's called the Startup Session. So somebody who's listening to this probably is thinking, well, I'm interested in business, or I'm interested in starting something up.
Yeah.
So if you have that desire, go with it, because not everybody in the world has that desire. So don't think for 1 second that that's like common. It's not. That desire is not common. It means you're an outlier. It means you're it means you're in a small percentage of people who have a desire to go start something.
Yeah.
So then the next question is, what do you want to create? So that's what I try to help people do in these different projects that I do, which is because I do a lot of creative stuff myself, and I love helping other people do it as well. So I do that through my writing, through these projects, through consulting now. So it's been fun.
Yeah. Fantastic. One of the things that, you seem to have done well is the products and services that you've created seem to have found their spot and landed in a successful way. Did you do any validation? I'm always curious about this aspect of it. Like, did you do any validation with your different products early on?
Well, yeah. Here's how I did it. So one, like I said, I was kind of shooting in the dark when I first started in terms of writing. So when I started Morkes.com, I started that website because I saw the power of and potential for blogs and for websites, and particularly for like authority blogs. Yeah. So I said to myself, well, if I'm going to start a blog, I have these ideas in my head. I like to get them out. I'm just going to start it with my name on it, because then I can always write up. Worst case scenario, if nobody reads it, I can just be like, well, whatever. I'm just writing for myself anyway. It's just my online journal. Yeah. Seriously. And so that was comforting for me, because actually it's important for me not to forget that I was scared of writing online when I first started. Mm-hmm. And the idea of putting stuff out there publicly terrified me. And I remember actually listening to some of my earlier interviews saying that, because it was closer to the time when I was still doing that, like in the beginning. Mm-hmm. For the first 6 months, I was uncomfortable writing and publishing online. Now I've kind of gotten over that fear, which is good if I want to make this sustainable. But I understand that if anybody has that fear. So I would say, so I guess I would say that as I wrote that stuff, I was basically writing for myself. But then as people started noticing and responding to me, I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is something that people really like. They actually like my voice. They actually think I'm creating quality work. That's great. I thought I was just, appeasing my own creative desires here, but somebody else, like other people are starting to like this now. Okay, awesome. So then when my first form of validation was using Pay What You Want, before I had written the book on it, for another book, for 2 Days with Seth Godin, because I'd done a lot of free writing up to that time. So I was like, well, what would people pay for something I create? So sure enough, Pay What You Want was really successful for me, with an audience of like 150 subscribers. I put this book out there, said, here, it's free, but if you want, you can buy me a cup of coffee, basically. Yeah. So I made $500 in that first month, which is really impressive for the person just starting out. I'm still impressed by it, because to not lose sight of the nature of the scale back then, because that was my first dollar made basically online. It was vindication that people liked what I was doing. So again, I took that idea, well, if they like this type of book and they like this style, I can keep doing this. So here's an interesting form of validation too. Okay. When I took that idea and then I wrote about it for Think Traffic, now Fizzle.co, the response was really, so I wrote about how I use Pay What You Want pricing for that on this like marketing business blog or website. And the response was a ton of questions on Pay What You Want. So I was like, wow, there's so many questions on this. This is a product that people would be interested in having because there's just such a broad response here. I'm going to go create that product. So through that one article, I had essentially gathered, without actually, there's no metric here. I was just kind of feeling it out. So I saw the response and I was like, there's potential here for a full-fledged product that's like useful, a book on this subject that answers these questions. So that was like kind of the initial idea validation. If there's enough people asking questions about something, there's potential for that product. So then the next step was, okay, building it, writing it, promoting it. And sure enough, I've made a few thousand now off of that book, which is pretty cool. And so I offer it as pay what you want as well. So that's, again, vindication of the pay what you want model as well for me. So in a lot of ways, so that's an idea of how I validate it.
Okay.
And then finally, sorry, because it's important, because there's different ways to validate things. The creative entrepreneur, the way I validated that was I got people on board to contribute. So number one was getting interest in contributing. So if I knew I could get like guys that were interested in contributing, then I had an idea that was worth creating. Because I figured if you're going to contribute, you might be the first supporter or the first person to promote it to your audience.
Yes.
So that was validation step number one. The second one was getting pre-orders. So I allowed pre-orders for this. Actually, I did pre-orders for the other book as well. So now I had money coming in, which forced me to complete the project and to do it on time. So those are different ways to validate. So I do believe in validation.
Yeah. Nothing like pre-orders as incentive to finish the project.
Big time. Like
Even
I
one.
Was like, I wouldn't recommend that unless like you're really close to launch. Like I feel like I overshot with some of those things. Like I put it on there and it was like, man, I probably should have given myself a little wiggle room here, but I just chose a ship date. Like for the pay what you want product, I probably would have, or for the book on pay what you want, I probably could have used another couple months. Honestly, I probably would have spent another couple months like building it, designing it, doing all this extra stuff. But I was like, I just put a ship date down. I was like, I'm going to force myself to ship on this day because otherwise I'm the kind of person who spends way too long on things, way more than I need to. And I just need to cut it off and just like launch it because I am kind of a perfectionist that way. So, so without ship dates for me, nothing gets done.
Yeah. That's actually a big, that's a big lesson for, I think, any of us that want to ship something, create something and deliver it. Setting that date is so important because I'm the same way. I'll sit there for months and, just out of the nature of wanting to create the best possible thing, just tweak this and that can go on for way longer than it should. So I'm a big believer in, man, set the date and do what you can to like make it, and you'll find a way. On the few projects that I've done, there's a lot of work towards the end, a lot of hours, but you always find a way to deliver. And that's the way it should be. When you've got people expecting you to deliver something, that's the best incentive in the world.
Two things I would say on that. So actually, I remember Seth Godin saying, like, his big focus was always the ship date, and that's what made me really embrace that idea too. Because it was like hearing him say it, I was like, I totally understand where he's coming from. Because I'm definitely a perfectionist by nature, but his thought process, Seth Godin, is ship. And set a ship date and force yourself to ship because you might think, okay, basically he's saying that if you do it enough, quality will improve, so don't worry about that. And he's not the kind of person who shovels garbage at all, obviously. Like anybody who reads his stuff knows that. Yeah. So he's not suggesting that. He's just saying just by simply setting a ship date and forcing ourselves to ship on time, we create better. We create, by the nature of it, we create more stuff. Because we're setting ship dates, but we get better at it as well. So we create better stuff. And I'll say this too. Two things, I guess. People put a lot of pressure on creating stuff sometimes. I can see it, and I hear it when I consult with people, and I see it all the time when I talk to peers and other entrepreneurs and people who are doing stuff. Put a lot of pressure on themselves when it comes to creating things. But what's interesting is that a lot of the stuff, especially if it's like in the digital world, especially if we're talking, gigabytes, and we're talking data and things like that. The iteration 1.0 is not the final iteration. Like you can have iteration 1.1 and 1.2, 1.3. The first thing you launch doesn't have to be complete, quote unquote, like to your standard, to your vision. So take solace in that, I suppose. Take comfort in knowing that, the first version does not have to be perfect. There can be mistakes, and you can unleash a version 1.1, even for books, which I've done before. So I've like sent it out, and I had spelling mistakes in it, and that seems like so amateur, but I swear, like, you even had editors check it out, and then there's spelling mistakes, and that sucks. Okay, well, that's an easy fix. Like, okay, so sure, it hurts my ego because I really shouldn't have spelling mistakes, but they were there. I fixed them, and so now the updated book, if you download it, is a slightly different version than the first book that probably the first person ever bought. Does that make sense? Because you can incrementally change these things, even books on the back end. So it's just important to realize. Yeah,
that is important. That's super important to understand and to really like get it. Like this is how things do get shipped, and this is how things work. I worked in the software industry for many years, and I always tell people, I tell my clients, that's standard process and procedure for a software company. Like really big, well-known software companies, they ship the first, it might not be the first code, but the first commercial code that ships from a software company has several bugs in it that you just can't test everything, and so you rely upon your users to let you know what works and what doesn't, and then you fix it. And that's why there's so many revisions for software. It's the nature of the business. The nature of creating the work that you do, Tom, and the work I do is no different.
Exactly, and there's definitely software is a unique beast in that it's just interesting how it works. But there's definitely like lessons we can apply from that to our stuff. So like I still have to do a lot of back end work on a book. Like although hypothetically, maybe I could release like a chapter at a time. I know I've seen people who have done that on social media. So even that's like if you really wanted to apply the principles of like software engineering and that kind of like fast-paced validation, hell, you could start writing and publishing one chapter at a time. And why not? So that's an example of a book. But you could do that with everything.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, fascinating. All right, cool. So much good stuff. I could talk to you for a very, very, very long time. And maybe we'll get a chance to do that on a beach somewhere next time you're in Portland, if you ever are for any reason. But
deal.
This has been great. One thing that I like to do is give people a chance to learn something a little bit unique about my guests. So what is your current like hobby that you engage with, or maybe what's the most adventurous thing you've done in the last 6 months?
I guess my hobby is the work I do, for better or worse, which is I think a good thing though for creating. So my hobby is the writing. It's the building, creative stuff. Yeah. So I'll defer to the most exciting thing I've done. I went to an Eminem concert in Johannesburg. Okay. When I first flew the night we flew into Cape Town, we randomly saw that Eminem was playing, so we decided to buy tickets. Before that, what are some crazy things? Oh my gosh! I mean, I've just been traveling. There's a million different crazy stories. Some more exciting, some less, but it's always been an adventure.
Yeah, cool.
And actually, we're gonna go to a safari out here in like the next month. So
wow,
that'll be a cool thing to report on.
Fun. That's something on my list as well. My wife and I want to do that. So I'll watch your Facebook and hopefully see some good some good stories or some good photos at the least of that adventure.
For sure.
Yeah. Hey, Tom, what's up next for you? Tell us what's new and exciting for you in the upcoming months.
Geez. So we're in the launch phase of the High Performance Athlete.
Yep. Okay.
For Jason's book from Insurgent Publishing. So I'm trying to push that which is really an interesting project because unlike some of this other business related stuff online, it's a different niche. It's different to a degree. So we're talking coaches, athletes, that kind of stuff. So doing a lot of like reaching out to those kind of those groups, and it's just a different way than reaching out to people online, which is fun. So that's the project we're working on right now.
Okay.
Cool. Other than that, we're getting ready to release the physical print, limited edition print of the Creative Entrepreneur Journal #1. So this is a digital, I forgot to mention, it's a digital and physical hybrid. So the physical print is actually redesigned, and it's totally different than the digital, but it's going to be kind of an artifact for people to hold in their hands, and it'll hopefully be something that people really love. So we're doing the physical print for that. We're rolling out the second issue come July, and I started work on a new book that's I'm really excited about, but it's probably 6 months out at least. So
Okay.
we'll see.
Okay. Great. Lots of exciting projects continuing for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. All right. So I'm going to link up all those resources to the show notes for this episode on the startup sessions, which will be episode 22. Outside of that, what's the best way to get in touch with you if we've got listeners or viewers that want to reach out to you to either pick your brain or take a look at your resources?
Yeah, so beyond, obviously, I would encourage people to go to tommorkes.com and they'll find everything.
Mm-hmm.
But also, they can always email me, which, again,
Okay.
you'll probably find if you go to the website, so that might be easiest. But
Okay.
just tom@tommorkes.com, and
Okay.
I respond to everything. So
Got it.
sometimes it takes me a while, so because I'm swamped right now. I have like 200 or 300 emails I have to go through today to get caught up. So
All right. All right, great. Well, this has been great. I've really enjoyed this, Tom, and I know that the listeners will find this. There's just been so much information covered here, and
Good.
I think I love interviews like this because you've got some experience, but you're like right in that momentum gathering phase where you're out there and you're doing it, and you're just right in the mix of making things happen, and it's a lot of hard work, and I love that because I love the energy of it. That's kind of where I feel like I'm just going into that.
Mhm.
And that's where we're just a few steps ahead of where a lot of my clients are, and maybe your clients too. So that
Yeah.
makes this whole, conversation really, really exciting and interesting to me. So thanks for giving me some of your time and for being on the startup sessions today.
Michael, thank you so much. It was really it's my honor to be able to talk to you and to speak to your audience for a little bit, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Absolutely, Tom. All right, take care. And for all the listeners and viewers, appreciate your attention on this show, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week on a new version of the Startup Sessions. Take care. Hey, if you enjoyed this interview, be sure to go to thestartupsessions.com and sign up to have the latest interviews delivered to your inbox weekly. All of these interviews are also offered on video at thestartupsessions.com or get the audio version via the Startup Sessions podcast. Just hop on over to iTunes and subscribe to the podcast there. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I know that your time is valuable, so I do my very best to provide the most inspirational and actionable content for creating a meaningful business. I'll see you on the next episode of the Startup Sessions.